Okay, Shalom Akim, Kahalayim La Yahabashim Yashabashim Kakudash, and double honors to the great Muslim apostles. Thadi Yashab for the strength in order to make this video, and Yaratazah they find it edifying, which means to build up, and also exhorting, which means encouraging as well. But this is the part 14 to the Native American history little series. I say little series, but the series that that I'm going through, with this book over here. Really, this one, today's focus is just upon another man, another known man, of whom you've probably seen in the cartoons, probably like Looney Tunes, or even in shows where people show feats of bravery or courage. AKA, his name is Geronimo, man, which we're gonna get into the history of, which is just a brief history, but how he got that name. But originally, it wasn't his name. But we are gonna get into it, Yaratazah. So, it's the part 14 of the Native American history series. So I'm gonna just get started with it, and yeah, man, Yaratazah, bring up precepts, as I did with the other videos too. I bring out the main history here too. So this is Deuteronomy. I said Deuteronomy because I already had a precept in mind as well, pertaining to this. But let me read this, Yaratazah, then that precept that I was about to get, it links to this point too. So, so this is the Native American history book, chapter 17. It's called Geronimo. That's the name right there. It says here, one of the most legendary Native Americans is known simply by a single name, Geronimo. The name is associated with doing something courageous, as I said before, typically jumping off of a cliff or other surface. This is comparable to the nursery rhymes because it takes something historical and tragic and dismissively turns it into a cliche. Because the amount of times you probably hear people say, if you don't hear it, at least you probably, if you don't hear it live in person, you probably hear it, in these cartoons or movies or something where, someone's about to leap off a cliff, as it just mentioned here. They always shout the name, Geronimo! That should probably trigger a memory or something. If not, I'm going to get into it. So yeah, this is comparable to nursery rhymes because it takes something historical and tragic dismissively, turns it into a cliche. This certainly was not the original intent, though. The man himself is largely a mystery to many people. Apart from recognizing his name, the fact that he was a Native American, aka a Gadite, it says, which means troop. It says he was a Native American, and that it is something they scream when jumping. Most people could not tell you much about the man himself. Like many Native people, his history was tragic, and he became a symbol of strength and courage of a people up against impossible odds. So now we're going to get into the origin of the man himself, Geronimo, which his real name, we're going to get into it here. It says a peaceful start changes into a nightmare, which is like the subheading here. The Apache were a notable nomadic tribe that lived in the southwestern region. In fact, I'm going to just get that definition right there, because normally when you hear the words like nomad or nomadic, it relates to like a peaceful individual. But let me just get the clear definition of nomadic, just for clarity here. So the Apache, which again you can see as a tribe within the Native American Indian. So amongst the Gadites, Apache was another section of Gadites, another tribe of Gadites. If you get what I mean, it's like a tribe within a tribe. So define nomadic. Oh, actually, it makes it clear here. It says, in the Google definition, it says nomadic means living the life of a nomad or wandering. If you go into the definition of nomad, it says a member of a people that travels from place to place to find fresh pasture for its animals and has no permanent home. It says a person who does not stay long in the same place, a wanderer. Come on. Initially, I thought like it was related to someone of something of peace, but clearly it states here that it's a traveler. So I stand corrected. A nomad is actually a person who travels from place to place, aka a wanderer. Scriptures talk about us being as pilgrims upon the earth, so we're also going to be seen as wanderers in that time to come of Jacob's trouble. Not to get on a tangent here, but that's the case right there. That's what came to mind as soon as I read that definition. So again, a nomad, as it says in the Google definition, a person who does not stay long in the same place, a wanderer. And then the other one, it says a member of a people that travels from place to place to find fresh pasture for its animals and has no permanent home. So there's always a person traveling, that's the point. You probably heard it in this modern era, digital nomad. So a person who travels from country to country but is able to work pretty much is location free. That's probably a modern term that you may have heard of in the news or on YouTube or something. So a nomad is a traveler. Now let's get back to this. So the Apache people, as it says there, the Apache were a notable nomadic tribe, which means they traveled from place to place. They didn't have a permanent home. That lived in the southwestern region, but by the time Geronimo was born, they had become more peaceful than their ancestors had been. This could have been because of the Spanish and those of the Spanish descent who had killed so many of the natives. In June, so of course remember the Spaniards, the British as well, I think also the French too, if not for Gad and Reuben, the French for the other northern tribes, in terms of Israel, the other northern tribes, specifically Latin America. The French would have came there, I believe the British as well as the Spaniards too. But this one, the Spaniards specifically targeted Gad and Reuben. Right, so it says there, as well as the British. So in June 1829, a baby boy was born in what is now, let me read that again. In June of 1829, a baby boy was born in what is now Nodoyon Canyon, Arizona. So Nodoyon is a place in Nodoyon Canyon is a place in Arizona. One of the states in America, So at the time, this was still part of the Mexican territory. So that's Issachar as well. So as the fourth child born to his parents. So let me just clarify that. 1829, there was a region called Nodoyon Canyon in Arizona state. And again, this is going into where Geronimo was born. And then this region in Arizona was where Issachar was also residing too. So we're going to get into it because Issachar and Gad had a little friction there too. We're going to get that. So yeah, at the time, this was still part of the Mexican territory. The fourth child born to his parents, there would be 4 more children born after him, totaling 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. The new baby was called Goyathle, so this is Geronimo's original name, Goyathle, which means one who yawns. The first 17 years of his life were largely uneventful, so there wasn't much to report on. The first 17 years of his life. After his 17th birthday, he joined the Council of Warriors, which gave him the right to finally marry. Now, just reverting back again. His original name, Goyathle, which means one who yawns, probably because of the fact that when he was a baby, he yawned a lot. So just from that presumption, you could tell that, okay, the parents named him Goyathle because of the fact that he yawned a lot when he was a baby, and that's what he had as a name. So let's read on. It says, the first 17 years of his life were largely uneventful. After his his 17th birthday, he joined a council of warriors, which gave him the right to finally marry. He soon wed an Apache woman by the name of Alope. By the 1850s, they had 3 children. So he got married young, innit? He got married young. Which really, as soon as a man has a seed and he's got his life together, that's the ideal stage to then start to bring up a family too. So let's get into this. So by the 1850s, they had 3 children. Up to this point in Geronimo's life, aka Goyathle, which was his original name, meaning one who yawns. It says up to this point in Geronimo's life, the Apache had lived in relative peace with few problems from the Mexicans who lived near them. So of course Issachar resided with Gad. They were close to each other, but they were peaceful for a time. Now it says the tribe was moving along during the summer of 1858, traveling first from Sonora to Casa Grande. They made a few stops. One was in a town commonly called Casquille by the natives. As it was a Mexican town, they camped outside of it, remaining several days as they traded with the citizens of the town and rested. So of course Issachar and Gad were doing their trade. Issachar was cool in the head temporarily though. Temporarily, Issachar and Gad were cool with each other again, making trades with each other. Now it says as it was a Mexican town, they camped outside of it, remaining several days as they traded with the citizens of the town and rested. Some of the Apache warriors would remain behind to protect the camp, while others went into the town to trade and get more goods. The men who stayed behind were armed and protected the children, the women and children in the camp. So of course, let me hold on. Let me see this again. Apache warriors remained. So it says as it was a Mexican town, they camped outside of it, remained several days. Alright, come on. So as certain men of the Apache tribe went to go and get some more goods, for the rest of for the Apache tribe of the Gadites, to get some supplies. They went to go and get some supplies. Then certain men were to stay behind to protect the women and children. And let me read what's about to happen. So it says, after a few largely uneventful days, the men were returning from Casquille when they encountered a few women and children fleeing the camp. They soon learned that Mexican troops from a different town had attacked the camp. So it wasn't even Issachar that was at the Casquille region, which is where Gad and Issachar were making trades with each other, because even that would have made sense anyways. But it was from a camp. It was Issacharites from another region that attacked Casquille as well. Well, when I say Casquille, the region where the natives were residing within that. But within that, it was majority of them being Issachar there. But Issachar was cool to trade. The Issacharites in Casquille were cool to trade with Gad there, the Apache tribe. But then the Issacharites in another region came to Casquille to invade the natives, man. So again, that was the friction that I was talking about, earlier on in the video. Gad and Reuben just knocking heads right there. But let me get this precept out, because I said I wanted to get near the beginning of the video. This is Deuteronomy, and it's part of the curses why Issachar went there and then provoked Gad, man, killing the women and children, while stealing the goods as well, mainly. I'm gonna read more into it, but let me read this first. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 54. So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eyes shall be evil towards his brother, and towards the wife of his bosom, and towards the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. So of course the key part here in verse 54, Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 54, his eye shall be evil towards his brother. So despite Jake being good with each other, there'll be also times which the curses how can I say this? Which really certain events really are evidence which supports this precept here. Where as it says that his eye shall be evil towards his brother. Issachar and Gad is just one of those examples where there was friction amongst them. Issachar, of course, coming to invade Gad, and then of course that was when Geronimo had that vengeful spirit within him, man. So the Most High put a very strong spirit of revenge upon him. Right. So that's just one example as well. Of course, you have some other examples, which Yaras as well. I'll probably do some more videos based on that too. But as I go through the history as well, that's the main thing. But let's just continue with this. It says, after a few largely uneventful days, the men were returning from Casquier when they encountered a few women and children fleeing the camp. They soon learned that Mexican troops from a different town had attacked the camp, killing all the guards and some women and children, including Geronimo's wife, 3 children and mother. So Geronimo's wife and 3 children got killed. So that must have really hurt him, man. Really, 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 really hurt him. It kind of reminds me of when what was it? 1 Samuel, I believe it was. Trying to remember the chapter, to be fair. It was probably after chapter 20 or after 25, where hold on, I believe either it was the Philistines that invaded, and then they took the 2 wives of David. They took the 2 wives of David. Then of course David inquired of the Lord, whether they'll be able to retrieve everything, their goods, and of course his family, which is his 2 wives, and he got them back. After he invaded, he got the victory, he got them back. It kind of reminded me that what happened to Geronimo there, and there was a very, very, very big wailing. There was a big wailing. When I say wailing, I'm talking about cries, man. When David discovered that the Philistines invaded. Hold on. But eventually the Most High said, if you didn't go, you'll be able to actually retrieve them. Alright, just hold on, bear with me. I want to try and get that account quickly. Oh, it wasn't even the Philistines, Salakia. It was the Amalekites. It was the Amalekites. I'll read it briefly. This is 1 Samuel, because it's a similar scenario here, where Geronimo, he got his Issachar came to invade Gad. Gad, and this was quite brutal as well, because his wife, Geronimo's wife, actually got killed. The thing is, with David, from the Most High's mercy, the Amalekites only stole his wives. They didn't kill him though, fortunately for David as well. So anyways, so I'm just saying because it's a similar scenario here. Let me read it from the scriptures. 1 Samuel 30 and verse 1. And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the 3rd day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small. You see, so it says, let me read that again. And had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. You see, so but in Geronimo's case, Issachar just slaughtered them, man. He slaughtered I'm laughing because Issachar means he is hired. I was just thinking that he was in that assassin mode, man, when it came to dealing with Gad, which really it was the evil, by the way, just to establish that. It was the evil that Issachar did, again, the so-called Mexicans did to to Gad, man. You know, the Apache tribe specifically. Yeah, that's why Geronimo was on that vengeance. But anyways, continuing on with King David's story here. So 1 Samuel 30 and verse 2, as it says, they slew not any, so the Amalekites didn't kill anyone, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. So they were stolen from David. Now, verse 4, then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. Until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives were taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite, which of course, if you read some previous chapters, Nabal died, and then David collected Abigail as his own wife. So read the former wife of Nabal. But anyways, so that's just for the understanding there, by the way. So verse 6, and David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord Yahweh, his power, man. So David would have been speaking some bullshit, on David, man, saying why they would have been just talking complete, out of emotions to say, we're gonna do something to you or something, towards David. But of course, David, his mind was rooted in Yahweh supporting him, man. As it says there, Yahweh, the Lord, his God, which is the Lord Yahweh, his power. Verse 7, and David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David, and David inquired at the Lord Yahweh, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. You see, that's what Yahweh said unto David, man. As soon as David inquired, okay, Baba Kushar, should we pursue them? You asked that question to Yahweh, and then Yahweh said, yeah, go for it, because you're going to overtake them. You're going to take back everything that they took from you as well. Which, remember, the Most High is in control of all of this. So he's the one who put the spirit in the Amalekites to just take and not kill. So again, that was also mercy from the Most High, and also an example of favor from the Most High, if you want to get deep into that level. Because he didn't allow Dave to go through too much pain, but the fact that they didn't kill the wives, though, you can see that as also favor too. So anyways, so that I'll leave at that. So for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. Hold on, let me check this. But yeah, the point is, if you don't read after that, because I want to get back to the book. If you don't read after that, they actually had the success, and David took back his two wives and the possessions that were stolen from by the Amalekites. So that's in 1 Samuel chapter 30. So again, it was just something that Harcourt, the Spirit, just reminded me of as soon as I was reading Geronimo, man. So it's a similar case. Of course, Geronimo in this case, his wives were actually killed, not just stolen, but they were killed. But Geronimo is just a guy. You can regard him as a guy of the world with his own story. But David is really he's a favored man of Yahweh, man. Not Geronimo. Geronimo is just a story of a guy in a world who, he went through certain things, but not as hefty as what King David had gone through. Right, so let's continue. So yeah, again, recapping, Geronimo's wife and 3 children got killed by the Mexican soldiers from another region, another town, not the ones that they were trading with, but from another town. And it says here, the Mexican soldiers stole their horses and goods destroying whatever they did not want or could not take with them. It says the warrior council that he had joined at the age of 17 had not convened for anything serious since he had become a member, but now they had a reason to meet and reach a course of action in retaliation for what had happened. With only 8 warriors left, Geronimo did not give his voice either for or against any particular action. They had no supplies, no weapons, and still a few women and children who required protection in what was now clearly enemy territory. The Apache chief decided that the best course of action was to leave the camp as the soldiers had left it, including the bodies of the dead where they lay, and to return it to their home as quickly and silently as they could. So yeah, man, pretty much God knew that they were in a weakened state, so of course they need to hold back and let Issachar do what they do. Let the battle scene be as it is. Right, so it says here, right, let me get to the point. Oh, okay, yeah, this is actually a good part as well. So it says, while many members of his tribe had lost relatives, he was the only one to have lost his entire family from the Mexicans massacred the peaceful tribe. When the Mexicans massacred this peaceful tribe. So Geronimo lost all of his family members, man, wife and 3 children. For several days, Geronimo did not react. He did not hunt or eat, and as he was nearly paralyzed with grief. It took several days of forced marches before they reached home, by which time he had started to eat and talk with others about what had happened. So several days, man, this guy was practically fasting because he was in that sorrowful state. That's why in the scriptures it talks about, I think maybe the Psalms pertaining to King David, fasting is actually a form of mourning as well, man. That's why it says the fasting humbles the soul. Hold on. Let me get this preset quickly. So Psalms 35 and verse 13, but as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled my soul with fasting, and my prayer returned into mine own bosom. So the key part says, I humbled my soul with fasting. And fasting does actually humble the soul. That's the thing. You try and not eat a day, depending on how adjusted your body is to not eating. Trying to not eat a day, 2, 3 days in a row or more. You actually get into that. Your body actually gets weaker. First of all, that's one thing. Of course, your spirit gets stronger, but you're humbling yourself in front of Yahweh Shem Yahshua when you fast. And that's why once a year, and we brothers do it, more frequently nowadays as well, where for one day or more. Well, I say for one day or more on a usual basis. One day or more you go on a fast. It helps you spiritually, but it also helps you physically too. But on that day of atonement, which happened recently as well, that's for that one day we then fast, and of course that's us afflicting our souls to humble ourselves in front of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. So anyways, the reason why I went on that tangent there, that little pathway in terms of fasting, was simply because of the fact that Geronimo was in a very sorrowful state. So while we're fasting, we also feel that sorrow as well, man, because we're humbled. You ain't got strength of the flesh, and then you're pretty much in that because you put yourself in a position where you have to rely on Yahweh Shah to give you strength, to keep going, man. That's really it. You're humbling yourself. Anyways, let's continue with this. So it says, so he did not hunt or eat as he was nearly paralyzed with grief. It took several days of forced marches before they reached home, by which he had started to eat and talk with others about what had happened. Upon reaching his home, Geronimo, which again, Goyathle, which again means one who yawns, his original name, but we'll use Geronimo now. So it says Geronimo was met with the decorations his wife had left and the toys of his children. His father had already died, so he visited the grave, and the only family grave he could visit. After burning both his home and that of his mother's, all of his past was destroyed as he came to terms with the fact that the life he had known was over. He could not give his wife, mother, or children a proper burial, and his peaceful life turned into a strong desire to get revenge on those who had destroyed everything he had known. From the day that he first began grieving, Geronimo hated all Mexicans. It would be the Mexicans who gave him the name Geronimo, which was the Spanish version of Jerome. So, of course, Geronimo was the Spanish version of Jerome, man. That's where the name comes from, Jerome. Jerome, like the Jerome, but the Spanish version of Jerome is Geronimo. So, anyways, so that's the point there. So you can see how, he started to hate. God started to hate Issachar because Issachar went on and invaded God. They were at peace before, but then another one from another region just spoiled the whole show for the trade system that they had with Gad and Issachar, man, and the Mexicans. Let me get this precept out, and then we'll continue. So again, Deuteronomy 20 and verse 54, so that the man that is tender among you, very delicate, his eye shall be evil towards his brother, and towards the wife of his bosom, and towards the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. So that evil lies there. Now let me get this precept out. This is Zechariah 13, Zechariah 7 and verse 8 to 12. It says, and the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto Zechariah, saying, thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, saying, execute true judgment, and show mercy and compassions every man to his brother, and oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, the stranger, nor the poor, and let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. But they refused to hearken, and pulled away the shoulder, and stopped their ears, that they should not hear. Yea, they made their hearts as an adamant stone, lest they should hear the law, and the words of the Lord Yahweh of hosts hath sent in his spirit by the former prophets. Therefore came a great wrath from the Lord Yahweh of hosts, man. So really, that's us all referring to the hard-headedness of 2/3 of Israel and of these wicked Israelites, man. When you try to tell them, which was the message here was, it says, and oppress, in verse 10, it says, and oppress not the widow, nor the fatherless, nor the strangers, nor the stranger, nor the poor, and let none of you imagine evil against his brother in your heart. Issachar imagined evil against Gad. Of course, we could say it's in ignorance as well, because they didn't know each other as brothers anyways. Because, that's when the Most High, because the curses were more severe back then as well. Where, again, destroyed because of lack of knowledge. So Hosea 4 and verse 6, where it says, my people are destroyed because of lack of knowledge. The Most High withdrew his name, withdrew the knowledge as well, for us being the princes of the power, Yasha Allah, again, Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. He withdrew all of that. So in that time, Issachar and Gad, they didn't know that they were brothers, man. So, of course, Issachar imagined evil against Gad, and they executed upon that evil thought as well. And then that was the origin of the origin of Geronimo's revenge, or that vengeful spirit that the Most High put upon him. Right, let me just prepare this preset. I'm gonna close it out soon. We're just getting into the brief history here. But yeah, that was the beginning, man. As soon as that evil eye was placed upon Issachar, and Issachar directed that towards Gad, it was a wrap, man. Geronimo, that was the evolution of Geronimo. He was no longer Goyathle, which means one who yawns, But then he was this fearless warrior. Now let me actually get to this part, man. I'm gonna have to skip a few paragraphs so I can get to this part. So hold on. Alright, so it says rise of a formidable opponent. You know, another thing, subheading. That's on page 106. But let me read this. It says, like a phoenix, the Geronimo who existed after the fires of his home and his mother's home was a completely new person. As the council met, again the council of warriors, as the council met, they took stock of their weapons and began to plan war with Mexico. Geronimo's first role was to gain assistance from their Apache neighbors. He recorded his recollection of his appeal for aid. Kinsman. So this is I'm gonna read it word for word. You know, the appeal that he wrote down for his Apache neighbors, which again were other Gadites. So yeah. Kinsman, you have heard that the Mexicans have recently done without cause. And read that again. Kinsman, you have heard what the Mexicans have recently done without cause. We can do to them what they have done to us. Let us go forward and show them. I will lead you to their city. We will attack them in their homes. I will fight in the front of the battle. I only ask you to follow me to avenge this wrong done by these Mexicans. If I am killed, no one need mourn me. My people have all been killed in that country, and I too will die if need be. So he was willing to die to get his revenge, man. That's how driven he was. You know, Geronimo. That's how driven he was, man. Because it was unrighteousness, it was injustice that he got dealt with. Imagine Issachar just came in. I said, right, we're gonna wipe this place out, man. We're gonna wipe the people, and then that's it. We're gonna burn their places up, man. You know, of course, any man would be angry, man. So of course, you know, this is a guy of the world. You know, guy who's had his own experience of sorrow and grief that's recorded pertaining to God. So this is really just like friction between Issachar and Gad, if you want to summarize it that way, between the Mexicans and the Native American Indians. So the Mexicans being Issachar, and then Native American Indians being Gadites. Alright, so after that appeal, it says the appeal won over the warriors of the first tribe and then the second. So it says roughly a year passed as they planned and prepared during the summer of 1859. It says the Apache tribes were on the warpath. Starting at the Mexican border, they looked formidable and their faces painted and their weapons ready. The Apaches who were not part of the fight were hidden in the mountains to protect them from retaliation. Yeah. Let me read that again. So it says the Apaches who were not part of the fight were hidden in the mountains to protect them from retaliation. So of course, God was in that strategic mode, you know, master tactician. Anyways, let me get to the point here. Let me see if I can get to the point. To be fair, this is actually quite interesting as well. So let me keep reading. It says, when they reached their destination, the town sent out a small group of 8 men to parley with the Apache. All 8 were killed and scalped. The Mexican troops came out in response, and there were minor skirmishes and lasted for the day. The Apaches were successful in taking over a supply train, giving them more weapons and provisions. The next morning, the Mexican town sent out their own force, 2 units of cavalry and 2 infantry units. Geronimo recognized the people from the town who had killed his family in one of the cavalry units. Requesting permission to lead Apache against the cavalry, the chieftains granted the request despite the fact that Geronimo had no battle experience. So despite that, Geronimo had that fire within him, like to just start mashing up Issachar. Again, this is because of the evil that Issachar did towards Gadma. So that was his intent, his incentive. Now it says it, he sent those under his lead to create a hollow circle around the advancing cavalry. As the cavalry attacked Geronimo and his men in the front, the other Apache warriors closed in from behind. You see? So they're encircling them. The battle lasted 2 hours, and only 4 Apaches remained when it ended. None of the cavalry survived. Soldiers from another fight soon attacked them, killing 2 of the remaining Apache warriors. Geronimo and the other survivor attempted to flee, but his companion was cut. Geronimo turned and killed the first attacker with a spear. The second he killed with a knife, despite the man having a saber. As other Apaches saw the single survivor taken down, not only the cavalry soldiers. Let me read that. It says, as other Apaches saw the single survivor taking down not only the cavalry soldiers, but also striking down soldiers from another division, they began to shout the Apache war whoop after his fierce action. So they're talking about Geronimo here. So the Apache warriors, they were getting motivated because of the fact that they were seeing Geronimo fight like this, fight so fiercely. Now it says, after his fierce actions, Geronimo became the war chief of his tribe. One of his first orders was to scalp all of the slain Mexicans. So of course, to scalp, just rip up the skin of the head, man. That's what scalping means. All right, so let's see. So that's Issachar. It says they then continued to raid and attack Mexican settlements along the northern border of Mexico. So again, Geronimo was on that revenge upon Issachar. You see, as like a brotherly fight, but in a very severe way. Because really, this involved blood. So that was the friction between Gad and Issachar specifically. Now let's see. Now, this is just one example of many. I'm just focusing on this because it's based upon the book that I'm reading currently. All right. So after that, then the Edomites came along, saying that they wanted Gad to get out of their resignated area. Man. Let me see this. All right, I'm gonna read this here out and then I'm gonna close it out soon. So, a new enemy, which is the name of the subheading here. It says the Mexican troops were no match for the fierce warrior they had created. And it's true, because of the evil that they did. We read it in Deuteronomy 28 and verse 54, Zechariah 7 verse 10 specifically. I see that's another precept, verse 10 specifically. And it says in fact, let me check if this precept matches up with that as well. I mean, yeah, to be fair, I might as well read that again. Read this precept. Because this was the knowledge that Issachar lacked when it came to that evil thought that they had towards God, and they executed upon it. So Matthew 5 and verse 21. It says, Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. Especially when you kill, without cause. Which Issachar had no cause. In fact, he even says it here. Let me read it. Verse 22, Matthew 5 and 22. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Rakah, shall be in danger of the council, but whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. But the key part I want to focus on there is the fact that it says, with his brother without, it says, whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, man. That judgment is really pertaining to what Yahweh Bashim Yashar would deem for a certain vessel, certain spirit, or really a group of people, within Israel, by the way, because the judgment is really for Israel since they were given the laws, to go through, man. That judgment is what you got to then endure, suffer through, because as a consequence of going against the commands of Yahweh Bashim Yashar, the commands of Yahweh, as he gave unto Israel. So it says, without a cause, whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother Rakar shall be in danger of the council. So, of course, Israel had that anger, towards God, man, his brother. So of course they're gonna get their judgment too. Which all the tribes have their form of judgment to go through too. Southern tribe Southern kingdom to the northern kingdom tribes as well. All right, now let me continue with this. So it says a new enemy. It says, one thing as well. When it talks about hellfire there, because you know how they're going to talk about, all right, why does it mention hellfire there? That's just talking about a state of mind, man. When a person is judged as well, they say that they're going through hell. Just like the way Jonah, he said that he was in hell 3 days. Let me just double check that. But it's a state of mind. It's a state of being. It's not talking about an actual physical hell that's below the earth or wherever Christians claim that it's located in, or some spiritual dimension. No, it's not. It's just a state of mind that's that involves severity. Suffering, severity, pain. It's a state of mind. Let me try to get this. Because when studying the scriptures, of course, studying other chapters will also help you to understand the chapter that you're studying, or reading other chapters will help you to understand the chapter that you're studying, in terms of context there as well. Just hold on. Right, so this is Jonah chapter 2 and verse 1. It says, Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord Yahweh his power out of the fish's belly, which was a leviathan type of a fish. It wasn't just some regular whale or regular large fish. It says verse 2, it was a leviathan, which is of course more of the rarer creatures, of which you don't really see too often, when you go out there in the oceans or seas. Now it says in Jonah chapter 2 and verse 2, well, nowadays I could say, but in this time to come, Leviathan will come out again. And there's many of them. It's not just one. So Jonah 2 and verse 2 says, And said, I cried by reason of mine affliction. You see, notice how I said the word affliction, unto the Lord Yahweh, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell cried I, and thou heardest my voice. So hell is mentioned here as well, but it's not referring to hellfire. It's not referring to hellfire. It's talking about a disturbed and painful state of mind that he was in because of the experience that he had there in the fish's belly. So it's the same way in Matthew 5 and verse 22. I'll read it again. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Rakah, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Which of course is just talking about a disturbed state of mind, in a state of suffering, a state of pain, which the Most High can do, to bug out a person and essentially punish a vessel for their works previously, for their evil works previously, for their sins, specifically Israelites anyways. It don't mean that you can't punish heathens. You can punish heathens, but Israel's who Yahweh is dealing with predominantly. So See, what point was I gonna make? Sometimes you get deep into a point, you forget the initial point you were gonna establish. Well, I brought up Matthew 5:21 to show the fact that Issachar was angry with Gad. Now just hold on, bear with me. So that and then it mentioned hellfire. That's just a disturbed state of mind, punishment, affliction. The same way Jonah claimed that he was in the belly of hell. It does mean that the belly had fire inside. Fire is just representative of the state of pain, the suffering that I was going through. It was like a fire. Fire is like a metaphor for that pain. So anyways, that's established. I think I'm gonna read this now. Just hold on. Calm, because I was getting into the word Raka, well, as it's spelled there, Raca, and in the root word, as it says here,
Strong's G 4469. Raka. Raka. Thayer's Lexicon. Related entry. Racha. Racha.
which the way you're saying it, Raka means spirit, as we know. But Raka here, as it goes into the root meaning, it says empty, senseless, empty-headed man. So these are like insults. Because it says there, whosoever in Matthew 5:21, whosoever shall say to his brother, Rakah, so in other words, whosoever shall say to his brother, empty, senseless, or empty-headed man, which these are insults, by the way, shall be in danger of the council, which is by the reasoning, if you read up further, the beginning of the verse, it says, but I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without cause, that without cause is a key, let me turn on the light, man. It's a key part of the verse, because if you're angry without cause, or you just throw out insults without cause, you're just going to subject yourself to judgment. That's essentially what that verse means, which is all sorts of pains as well. Yeah, man, over here in the UK, the days are shorter than the nights right now, man, for this current state of time. But yeah, let's continue on with this. So, a new enemy, the Mexican troops were no match for the fierce warrior they had created. Geronimo found numerous successes as he led his people against settlements on the border, but a new enemy was encroaching on their ancestral lands, the Americans. Now, these Americans are talking about the Edomites, the settlers who came over there from Britain, from Spain, predominantly Britain. Now, during the 1870s, the US government was actually able to strike a peaceful balance with the Apache. Lieutenant Colonel George F. Crook. F. Crook. Yeah, because the Edomites are crooks, man, so his name is quite fitting for his role. So Lieutenant Colonel George F. Crook was able to maintain the peace for as long as it was his responsibility. Unfortunately, his successors were not nearly so adept or competent in 1876. So the people after F. Crook. So for this case, F. Crook specifically was able to maintain the peace, however that may have been done. But his successors, so the people after him, they struggled. It says, unfortunately, his successors were not nearly as adept or competent. In 1876, the US government decided that they preferred to move the Apache fighters called Chiricahua, or called the Chiricahuas again. The fighters, the Apache fighters, called Chiricahua, to a reservation that was in a completely barren wasteland that the US knew it would not want to occupy. When the Apache found that the lands were not only impossible for living in their traditional ways, but also that the US government also failed to make good on the required rations that would allow the Apache to survive. The Apache revolted. So pretty much Esau took God for to be fools, man. That's why I started smiling there midway of reading the paragraph. Because Esau, the successors of the Lieutenant Colonel George F. Crook, what a name, man. What a name. But yeah, George F. Crook, the successors of him, pretty much transported the Apache fighters, Chiricahua, the Apache fighters, into a region where they could even grow crops, man. It was a dead zone when it comes to being able to grow crops. And then they were pissed because of the fact that they were angry because of the fact that they weren't even given food anyways to look after themselves. So Esau didn't even deliver food. So that was just making God be as fools, man. Now it says, fleeing the reservation, Geronimo led hundreds of people into Mexico. Instead of raiding Mexican towns, they turned their attention to the American settlers. So, because of the anger that they felt from being rejected in those lands, those dead zones, the Apache God was focused on. All right, we're gonna look at these. We're gonna target these Edomites. And it says, fleeing the reservation, Geronimo led hundreds of people into Mexico. Instead of raiding Mexican towns, they turned their attention to the American settlers who were stealing their ancestral lands. The raids lasted for 10 years. 10 years, man. This was like, hold on. This was from 1876, so it's pretty much from 1876 to about 1880s. So, yeah, man, 10 years. Anyways, let's continue. So General Crook was sent back to deal with the Apache. This time forced them back to the reservation. This started a pattern for the Apache for escaping the poor conditions of the reservation and surrendering to the military and being taken back to the reservation, never trusting any of the agreements of the US government that had repeatedly proven that it was untrustworthy. Geronimo led his people away from when things were too, and of course it was untrustworthy. Of course, even Jake, in their own ignorance, they still knew, okay, never trust an enemy, especially after the Mosai gave them a few examples of why they shouldn't trust Esau either. Now it says, never trusting any of the agreements of the US government that had repeatedly proven that it was untrustworthy. Geronimo led his people away when things were too difficult for them to remain where they were. In 1886, which is pretty much 10 years from 1876, General Miles was in charge of the American soldiers in the area. When he met Geronimo, he promised the distinguished chief that he and his Apache brethren would be sent to Florida for an indefinite exile, but would then be returned to Arizona. As could be expected, this was a lie, and men were forced to do hard labor instead of imprisonment. When he was released, Geronimo was sent to Oklahoma instead of Arizona. The pattern of escape and surrender continued, partly because Geronimo could not assimilate into the artificial life that the American government tried to force on him. So of course, after one way of life, referring to Geronimo here, to assimilate, certain spirits just can't do that, man. That's why, you have that constant resistance that you had towards the US government, man. So he had a very strong spirit upon him, man, to resist Esau. Hence the up and down of, as it says here, the pattern of escape and surrender. So the Mosai just kept putting him back. Yeah, God, you're gonna have to go through the curses as well, man. Being under your enemy, same way as the other southern tribes and the other northern tribes as well. You Latinos, and Judah, Benjamin, and Levi for the southern tribe, southern kingdom. And yeah, so that's really the point there. That's the story of Geronimo, man. That was the main focus of today's Native American History Part 14. Because you always hear Geronimo, Geronimo, Geronimo. Whenever someone, even just a casual leap into the pool, you might hear a guy say Geronimo. Which is the reason why they say Geronimo, because it's an example of bravery. As we read here in this history, in this book again, which is the book is called Native American History by Captivating History. Captivating History is the name of the authors. Native American History is the name of the book. So again, that's there once more. So yeah, man, because of the bravery and the fearlessness, the fearlessness that Geronimo had, which was all driven from that revenge to Issachar. That was the origin of him being very fiery when it comes to being strategic against Issachar, as well as these Americans as well, the U.S. government. So that's why people shout Geronimo, so that they can get some courage, since he was a very prominent Apache fighter, Apache warrior, which again is a Gadite tribe. A Gadite tribe for pretty much just to show courage and bravery. That's what it is. That's why they shout Geronimo. So now you know the history of a Geronimo and what led to his name change from Goyafale, which means one who yawns. He probably yawned a lot when he was a baby. That's why he got that name. And from Goyafale to Geronimo, which is which is Spanish for Jerome. That name right there, Jerome. So it's just for bravery and courageousness, man. And Yaratazar, you're edified. I'm gonna leave it there. Shalom, wa Yahbashim Yashab Rakhtha, Kahala Imla Yahbashim Yashab Basharaka Kudash, double honors to the great Muslim apostles and the elder bishops as well. Yaratazar, you found edifying and exhorting. Shalom.